We have with us Sanjiv Kapoor, the ex-CEO designate as far as Jet Airways is concerned. Sanjiv, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here on CNN News 18. First things first, with you stepping down, with you deciding to go, is this now an end as far as any revival plans for Jet were concerned?
No, not at all. I don't think anyone should come to that conclusion. The promoters are still very committed, and they're very confident that they will be getting the airline back in the skies soon.
Now, considering the fact that you're saying that, and we've spoken multiple times as far as the last year is concerned, somewhere around September or October, it almost looked like that everything is on track and the revival will be a matter of days, if not weeks. So where did it all go wrong then?
Right. So back in August or September of last year, we were ready to start operations by late October, early November, maybe into December, a few weeks here and there. The plan was to start with 3 aircraft, grow to 5 by the end of December, and to 12 or 15 by this summer, which is now. And things were progressing well. We had, everything lined up, all the contracts, all of the operational requirements, the IT systems, everything was lined up. But unfortunately, there was a surprise ruling from the NCLAT, which allowed some additional past claims to be added to what was to be paid or is to be paid by the new promoters over and above what had been agreed as part of the bankruptcy resolution process, the NCLT process. And that actually, slowed things down because it was a surprise. There was uncertainty as to, the source of those funds and what does it mean. And, the entire purpose of bankruptcy is that you agree on what past liabilities you take on, and then you get a clean sheet beyond that. But if you have things added on after the fact, then obviously that poses great risks for the future. What else could come? Is there a precedent that is being set here? But one thing led to the other, and I think essentially that addition and what are the implications? How do you work around that? How do you ensure that it doesn't open a Pandora's box of more additions and defeat the purpose of the bankruptcy code? Is what has held up the transfer of ownership of the airline. And until the ownership is transferred, you can't assume control and start the airline. I mean, everything was prepared by the team, but you need the ownership to transfer before you can start the airline. So that is where matters have been stuck. There have been appeals to NCLT, NCLAT, etc., and that process is sub judice still going on. But I believe that after all of this time that has passed, all of the discussions and negotiations that have gone on, there is hope. Promoters are confident that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and they will be getting control or ownership of the airline soon, following which they can resume their startup planning.
Sanjiv, considering the fact you're seeing a lot of blood and sweat went as far as planning for the revival is concerned, the other important question is what really happens to employees who are still under Jet now?
Well, yeah, it is tough. It's not easy. So first, let's take a step back. It would have been much easier for the promoters, or for anybody for that matter, who had funds available to start a new airline, right? Than try to do something which had never been done before, which is to revive an airline that has shut operations. But the promoters placed the bet or took on the challenge because of the legacy and the love for the Jet brand, the value that brand has. And also because of the hope that by reviving Jet, they can also give a second chance to the employees of Jet 1.0, as we call it, and bring them back into the fold as the airline grows and make it a sort of a positive, happy, conclusion for all. Bring a loved brand back, give jobs back to the employees as the airline grows, bring competition back in the full service space. All of that is what made the promoters, I believe, decide to try to revive Jet rather than start a new airline. What happens to employees now is that the hope is the airline still revives, because everybody's better off from the airline reviving, all the stakeholders, than the airline shutting down, because if the airline shuts down or doesn't revive, then there's no hope for jobs to come back into the airline. But if the airline revives, then over time, of course, jobs will come back.
Sanjiv, I want to understand the specific issues as to what really happened with the discussions that happened with Jalan Kalrock. Payments to creditors, is that now being seen as one of the biggest reasons as to why the revival has been delayed?
Yeah, I don't want to comment on specifics because the matter is sub judice and there are claims and counterclaims, but I do know that It's a bit of a chicken and egg, from my point of view. I'm looking at it from the outside because I'm not directly involved in the legal proceedings. You don't, the promoters have put in a good amount of money. I mean, for the last 2 years, to keep to revive the company, to pay salaries, to put down deposits for IT systems, aircraft, so on and so forth. It's not that they've not put in any money, but any money that they put in before the transfer of ownership is not equity; it's just expense. And and the bills that are to be cleared, the creditors that are to be paid as part of the resolution process, which is the airline ownership transfers. You pay for creditors. All of that happens kind of in a choreographed manner. But with the ownership transfer held up, obviously things are held up. But I think the intent to pay, the intent to go by whatever was agreed through the NCLT proceedings originally, and also, to find a resolution to the NCLT ruling on the Provident Fund, still remains. I think the intent is go by what was agreed and fulfill it. But I think we just need to, or the promoters, I'm no longer, I said we because obviously I was with them until last week. But they just need to get the confidence, mutual confidence that the ownership will be transferred and the payments will be made. Equity will come in. Through the equity, you make the payments.
Now, Sanjiv, you touched upon this a short while ago. So the question that I'm essentially trying to understand is, why did the Jalan Kalrock consortium decide to bid for Jet or try to revive Jet rather than just starting a new airline, something that we've seen with Akasa? Wouldn't that have been easier?
Again, it's the brand. It is the brand equity. It is some of the assets that come with the airline. It is the staff the pool of staff that can be rehired as the airline grows, and the desire to actually, do something that has not been done, which is revive an airline which has great brand equity, great global brand equity, great product, and do something that people are waiting for. The consumers want Jet back. I mean, it's very clear. Let me give you an example. In social media, when airlines post on Independence Day or Republic Day or Holi or Diwali or even J.R.D. Tata's birthday, when you post, social media posts commemorating those days, Jet Airways last year, even though it had no aircraft flying, it has not flown for 3 years, the post would get 3 times or 4 times more engagement than any other airline in India. That's the kind of love people have for Jet. So I think the promoters were wanting to just bring that back because there was demand, there's goodwill. It's a positive, it's the right thing to do and people benefit because the creditors get something back. When you start a new airline, if Jet remains shut and is liquidated, then that's the end. But if the airline is revived, the value that a revived airline can create can make all the stakeholders far better off than not having it revived. And I keep referring to examples in the West where airlines have gone through bankruptcy proceedings and they've gone on to make tremendous value, create tremendous value for the shareholders and for all stakeholders. And that is what I think the promoters are trying to do here.
Are you still hopeful for a revival? Do we have any sort of timeline? I know you're not involved with Jet anymore, but is there still an optimistic timeline that we could see Jet fly once again?
See, I'm obviously, my last day with Jet was April 30th, and but even though I'm no longer with Jet or with the promoter team that is attempting to revive Jet, I'm hoping to see Jet fly, and I can only speak to what the promoters feel and what they've told me, and they have assured me and assured everybody actually that they talk to that they're committed and they will see the airline fly. Now, I'm not going to be there as part of it, but I sincerely hope they succeed because after all the money, blood, sweat, and tears, effort that has gone into it, I think that should happen. It really should happen. It will be a great vote of confidence in the IBC process in India. You may have heard the news today that one of the other airlines has filed for insolvency voluntarily, Go Air, just a few minutes ago. India can't afford to see all of its airlines collapse and be left with just a monopoly or a duopoly. I think for consumers, we need to, do what we can to revive the industry or revive the players that create competition in the industry, to make it healthy and to give the customers a choice.
Sanjeev, I just want to move from Jet and ask you, issues as far as the industry are concerned. You've been an industry veteran, you've been involved with Vistara and then with Jet in your last role as well. Two things that I want to understand. One, how difficult is it to run an airline in India? And secondly, how difficult is it to make it profitable?
It's very tough to run an airline in India and to make it profitable. Frank Sinatra had once said, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. It's the same in the airline business. If you can make an airline succeed in India, you can make it succeed anywhere. India has some of the highest costs, not just fuel costs, which are very high, and the ATF taxes on top of the fuel cost, but the cost of maintenance is very high because the environmental factors causes engines to degrade, very high tax regime, very low fares. So you've got a high cost structure, very low fares, and an intense competition. So when you combine all of that, it's a very tough place to make money. Of course, there have been one or two airlines that have done extremely well. They've grown. I mean, we've got airlines now with 300 aircraft or close to that, which is fantastic. But if you look at the numbers in detail, you'll see that airlines make money operationally typically only when oil prices are low. And when oil prices rise above a certain level, operationally you don't make money. And what has kept airlines going in terms of cash to tide through the times that they don't make money is just sale leaseback revenues. You keep ordering more aircraft and then you sell them at a profit and you realize those the profit revenues up front. And that generates the cash to keep you going. But that's not a sustainable method because forever, because it assumes you're going to keep growing forever, and I don't think any industry or company can grow forever. So at the end of the day, the fundamentals have to be correct. There's some airlines that have done a great job of signing fantastic contracts that protects them during downturns or during crisis. Engine contracts have been responsible in the past to bring down people, say, or to contribute to the fall of Kingfisher. It appears from what we read in the media for Go Air also, the engine contract was hurting them, whereas you've got other airlines with the same engines who rode out the crisis much better because they had much better contracts. So it is a cost structure, which is very high, your tax structure, which is high, your environmental factors, which make maintenance very, very, very expensive by global standards, your low fares, and also in some cases poor contracts that have all contributed into making this a very tough industry for many of the players. But one can only hope that you learn from what has happened and what has not worked in the past, and you improve. And what we were trying to do at Jet, again going back to Jet, was bring in a team. We brought in a team of people from various different airlines and backgrounds who, through experience, had learned what to do and what not to do, and make sure that you set up a system by which your cost structure is minimal, your contracts are airtight, and you have a revenue model which is not just a copy-paste of other airlines, but which is actually differentiated and which can generate revenue beyond what others have been able to do. And so you have to think outside the box in terms of your business model and your revenue model, and you have to get your cost structure and your contracts airtight. And that is what I think has held some or many of the Indian carriers back, because somewhere or the other, these factors didn't all line up. And and so when the tide is high, it lifts all boats, and you avoid the rocks. And the tide is high when the fuel prices are low, essentially. But when the tide drops, that is when you start hitting the rocks. And those who are better navigators, who have better ships, they can skirt around the rocks, and the others just crash into them.
You touched upon most of the issues that I actually wanted to ask you. I want to ask you something as far as consumer behavior is concerned. Unfortunately, we've seen a spate of these episodes from P-Gate, and not just one but multiple times. Consumers being extremely aggressive with cabin crew. Why do you think are we seeing suddenly a rise in cases like these? Is this because we don't have stringent policies? Is it the lack of implementation? Or do you think these cases just now being reported? They were even happening earlier, but because there's a lot of media attention, they're just now being reported more.
Well, I am absolutely befuddled as to the P-Gate incidents. There've been 4 incidents on international flights into Delhi, 3 of them on New York, Delhi. I've never seen that kind of thing before. So that is an aberration. And I don't know whether it is just younger people traveling abroad, more now, and, don't have the maturity to hold the alcohol, or some kind of aggression that has come into a segment of the population who fly abroad and think they made it, or whatever, and they lose control of the behavior. But stepping away from these 3 or 4 incidents, they've always been throughout the history of aviation across the world, there has been unruly passengers, and you deal with them through very strict measures. I think India has those measures in place now. If the airlines had more freedom and independence to take action against unruly passengers on their own without having to go through an onerous committee process, it would be even better, like it is in the rest of the world, where airlines can put flyers on the no-fly list without having to go through a very onerous process, actually, which is defined currently. So unruly passengers has been an issue, and the way to address it is by being very strict, which I think in India there is a lot of attention, and people are being very strict about it. But the P-gate incidents, I don't know. I mean, I just talked about what might be happening there. It's an aberration. I've never heard those kinds of things happen before.
Yeah, absolutely baffling, as you said. Lastly, Sanjiv, before I let you go, what's next for you? Where do we see you next?
Well, I will share where I'm headed to in the coming days. I just want the news of me moving on from Jet to sort of be absorbed, and then I will reveal where I'm going to next. I don't want to conflate the two, but I look forward to sharing that in the coming days.
Sanjiv, thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here in CNN News 18. Always a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you so much, Ritima. Thank you.